our distinguished guests and delegate to be here with us in our event today, Digital Assets Transforming Financial Markets, hosted right here at Movenpick Hotel, Hanoi. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Ling, and I'm honored to be here with you guys at the host of this event. And I hope that we will have a significant day together with a lot of meaningful, impactful information from all of our guest speakers. And today, we are joined by some of the brightest minds in finance, blockchains, capital markets, all industry leaders from Vietnam, Hong Kong, Thailand, and Malaysia. We all gather here for an afternoon of insight, meaningful dialogue, and impactful connections. Our focus, regulated digital finance, is no longer just a vision of futures. It's already here. Maybe that's the reason why you are all here, right? And we will explore how it's shaping the futures of banking, payments, capital markets, and financial inclusion across the region. And ladies and gentlemen, at today's event, we are honored to introduce the participations of our distinguished speakers. Please join me in welcoming Mr. 𝗕𝗃𝗰𝗲𝗶, Vice President and Head of APEC Ecosystem, Hedera Foundation supports enterprise-grade blockchain adoption across Asia. Mr. 𝗕𝗃𝗰𝗲𝗶, Founder and CEO of 𝗘𝘃𝗲𝗿𝗆, the first licensed IEO platform in Malaysia. Okay. Mr. 𝗕𝗃𝗃𝗰𝗲𝗶, Founder and CEO of 𝗕𝗃𝗲𝗵𝗆 Digital, the leading institution custody platform in Southeast Asia. And our panel discussion will be guided by Mr. Frank Lee, Partner, Head of Marketing and Sales of Varmeta, Vietnam pioneer blockchain and AI firm, driving blockchain adoption in finance. One more time, please give all a big round of applause. So before we begin, may I kindly remind everybody to switch your mobile phone device into silent mode so we can fully engage with the season ahead. And also, we already well prepared the tea break area, so feel free to go outside to have a quick boost of energies and reconnect with each other. Okay, so throughout this event, and to set the stage, our first panel will explore fundamental questions. How can financial institutions in Vietnam begin their digital asset journey, and why now? We will unpack what digital assets are, how they can unlock real-world value from banks and financial service providers, from tokenizing real assets to enabling more secure, efficient, and compliant operations. This season will leave no stone unturned, and from digital custody, regulator compliance to immigration strategy, and Vietnam evolving policy landscape. Let's start now, right?
Check. Okay, good. Thank you, Ling, for your introduction. I'm feel very energetic now. So thank you all for coming today, all the panelists and the attendees. So to kick off the discussion today, can each of you briefly share about what your organization does in this digital asset space? Yeah. Maybe start with you first. Yeah,
maybe I'll start first. My name is Jeff. I look after the APAC ecosystem for Hedera, the Hedera Foundation. At the foundation, our core goal is, I like to talk about the 3 C's. So we provide capital for projects and builders. We also provide community, develop the ecosystem so that more ecosystem partners can actually work together. And then we also work on creating access to commerce. So with these 2 C's, you can actually start having real on-chain activities. and multiple different initiatives. My key focus and role is on localization. So looking at every single market, and specifically here in Vietnam, the opportunities from a regulatory perspective, also from just market access. And that's what the foundation does. So if you're a builder and you're looking for support, please come find me afterwards. I also have a few other colleagues here in the room, looking very forward to hearing about your project and how we can support. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Rennie? Yeah, please.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I'd just like to thank Varmeta, right, for the opportunity to be here today. It's indeed a pleasure, right, to be in Vietnam and to be able to interact and impart, some aspects of digital asset and tokenization with you today. My name is Rani, as I mentioned. I am the founder and CEO of 𝗘𝘃𝗲𝗿𝗆𝗲. 𝗘𝘃𝗲𝗃 is a licensed and regulated, digital fundraising and investment platform. We are actually located in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So we are regulated by the Securities Commission Malaysia. So we enable a broad range of asset classes, right, to be used for the purposes of fundraising. We onboard both investors as well as issuers. So by way of background, right, I spent more than 20 years, right, in the capital markets in Malaysia. The last being as a chief commercial officer, where I did oversee the businesses of, equity, fixed income, derivatives, Islamic capital market, and data, right? And so what led me to set up 𝗘𝘃𝗲𝗃 essentially is the fact that there's a huge funding gap. A lot of good companies that couldn't get access to financing on the one hand. On the other hand, there's lots of investors that want to get into private markets, right? But they don't have access. So really, we try and match these two together. And I'll share more with you, right, as we go through the session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rennie. Edit.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người. I used to work for Techcombank for 2 years, so I can speak a little bit of Vietnamese. My name is Atit. I'm the founder and CEO of 𝗓𝗏𝗏 Digital. We are a licensed custodian. We are headquartered in Singapore, and we are licensed out of our Hong Kong and Thailand entity. So we provide the custody of asset service, right? So we safeguarding clients' asset. We basically provide cold wallet service to our clients. So security is very important. We've been operated for 3 years now. We holding asset almost $1 billion within our vault right now. So happy to be here. Happy to share more about the landscape of the industry.
Thank you, all the panelists. And I think before we jump into the questions, so I have a question for the attendees here. Can you please raise your hand if you are familiar with tokenization, digital asset terms, or you are working any work related to that? Can you please raise your hand? Oh, wow. Thank you, thank you. So yeah, I think the panelists now can adjust your answers and your sharing to the attendees. Yeah. So my very first question is can you please share what's the level of familiarity with tokenization and digital assets among the FSI sector attendees? I think in the countries that you work with and in the region generally. Jeff, can I have you?
So from an APAC perspective, I like to have a framework of engagement. I look after ecosystem, which means it's more consumer retail based. I previously was looking at both supporting enterprises, working on ventures, co-creating with companies, like entrepreneurship structures, whether it relates to both banks and other financial institutions and law firms and regulatory entities. And so basically what I'm trying to say is depending on the rules and the regulations in each market, the maturity actually starts to uptick. So you have certain jurisdictions that are very natural international financial centers, Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, and similar other area jurisdictions. I've seen the race to understand how to deploy a stablecoin, how to tokenize a fund, because there's a lot of talent that's already there. So let's say the exposure and the ability to test is much higher. And that's what I would say how I would judge the sliding scale. For markets that are more, let's say, transitory markets, where you're using it for trade finance, or it's a very localized economy, not as many opportunities to really explore the technology outside of like a private permission environment, right? So we'll cover that as well, and from a protocol perspective, what it means to be public permissionless all the way up to private permission and everything in between. So I guess I'll stop there.
Thank you. And I have another question for Rennie and Atit. Like business come with value. So how can digital assets create value for financial services, service providers, and banks? And if you have like any ideas of the impacts in Vietnam, please share your thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you. I think tokenization, digital assets, and all that, right, have the potential of obviously creating some sort of a transformative opportunity, right, with banks, right, and it always stems from what is the gap there is with the businesses that the banks today, right. So and how is it that tokenization can help to address that particular gap, right? So if you look at how banks today actually distribute their products, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity, right, for improvement in the way in which the products can be distributed, particularly when you look at private market assets. So today, if you look at private market assets, right, they are invested into by institutional investors, high net worth investors, yeah. But again, right, it is limited to often, right, clients who are, clients of private banks, yeah, as opposed to a broader category of people, right? So there are a lot of investors out there, right, who want to invest into these sort of asset classes, who today do not have access. So that, to my mind, is a huge opportunity, really, for the banks to be able to actually, reach out to a broader class of investors, right, with different product offerings. Because if you look at, today, right, even institutions today, increasingly, right, a higher proportion of, investments is going to alternatives, right? Up to 30% is actually going to alternatives. And if you look at, individual investors today, a lot of investors actually want to invest into alternatives, but don't really have that opportunity. So, that's obviously, one example, right, where, banks can actually successfully grow, right, product offering, and in that way also, right, bring in new investors. And the other thing I think the banks need to bear in mind is that there's a huge generational shift that is happening, right, where the patriarchs of the businesses are retiring, younger, more tech-savvy investors, owners are coming in, right. At the same time, also a lot of younger tech-savvy investors are coming in. So the banks need to move along and understand that, look, the landscape is changing. Investors, I mean, their clients or the customers expect to do things differently, right? So that's something that is, I think, very strong imperative, right? At least the banks that we speak to in Malaysia recognize that, right? And are moving, right, in that direction. And when you look at, even markets like Vietnam today, right, you have a large SME base. But not all of those SMEs are actually being well served. Not all of them can meet the requirements of the banks sometimes, right? But through actually a tokenization, right, it is entirely possible, right, to provide different forms of alternative financing. And where the banks can come in is that you can partner really with fintechs, support fintechs, etc., right, so that these SMEs can actually grow and potentially then become the customer, right, of the bank, right? But beyond that, of course, there's lots of opportunity, in trade finance, etc., that banks can also harness.
Can I follow up very quickly an example?
For sure.
So I decided to come to Vietnam a month ago and really live here for the summer to see and understand the problem statements that the Vietnamese companies, foreign and domestic, experience, and then test how blockchain tokenization could actually add value to these problems. And so I was, quick story, I was actually talking to a furniture owner, a distributor. And so, and this is, it plays very close because of the tariffs, right? And so he was saying he makes furniture in Vietnam and he distributes it to around the world, but a lot of the core components he receives is from mainland China. From the screws to the joinery and everything like that is from mainland China. It's final assemblies in Vietnam. And so the biggest problem is the invoicing and the clearing of those invoices, especially now with tariffs, you have to actually deal with the arbitrage and then compliance. And so we were just talking, and he's like, okay, so how do we fix this with stable coins, with tokenized invoices, so that you can have mezzanine loan financing in between, so that you're actually clearing now and not dealing with FX risk, and also being more efficient with your business. And then what are the pieces that you need in place, from the banks, the custodians, to the exchanges, who would actually buy this debt or buy these like future forwards? And so I think we should think about it like that. Like, we're having this discussion today. We're talking about how the technology could benefit everyone, but we should also look at the very specific use cases. So it's something that I've noticed overall is like finding these very specific Vietnamese use cases that make a lot of sense for the ecosystem.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Rani's point, right? So obviously tokenized asset class will allow retail clients to be able to access a lot of financial instrument where they could never have access before, right? So private credit, all those things, it's only available for institutional, but now it's also available for retail as well. But I think there are two things that are very beneficial for real life would be investment, first of all. We already talked about investment, and also payment. Jeff touched a little bit on payment, right? So I'll give a use case, right? So we already see a lot of yield-bearing stable coins, right? Giving 4 to 5%. It used to be 5%, but it's not anymore. Where, countries like Thailand, if you put your investment in deposit, right, you would earn, I think, 1% up to 1.5 million baht, and then the rest you earn like 0.1%, right, which is nothing. Now you have a yield-bearing stable coin where you just hold the token and you can earn like 4-something%, right? That actually open up a lot of opportunity to people, right? Because, and it's also very liquid as well. You can just move it, you can change it to stablecoin, you can use it for payment. So that actually, I would say, giving a fair investment and more investment opportunity for people. I think Vietnam might not have that problem because the interest rate is much higher here. But I mean, the stability of US dollar actually helps as well. I think Vietnam also very advanced in the regulation on the tokenized and digital asset. I think you guys gonna launch crypto exchange on Sandbox next year, right? I think there's a lot of payment project as well. There's also crypto payment project in Da Nang, I heard, where tourists can use crypto or stablecoin as a means of payment. That's actually happened in Thailand as well, right? Thailand also launching a G token, which is a tokenized Thai baht government bond, which also give 2% yield to clients, right? I mean, with these kind of things, it actually, people are more open up to, willing to give more fair yield to the end clients. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Thank you, Edith. So I really love, and I think your attendees really love your real use case example. But like, can you please give us more when it comes to how tokenization of real assets can provide liquidity and accessibility to the market?
Yeah, sure. I'll give another real use case of the crypto and stablecoin payment that is happening right now. So 2 weeks ago, Thai SEC actually just launched a hearing, which is a consultation paper for tourists coming to Thailand to be able to use crypto or stablecoin as a payment, right? So basically, they come to Thailand. You guys probably know an exchange called 𝗕𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗆 in Thailand, right? So they deposit their crypto into 𝗕𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗆, they convert that into Thai baht, and they can transfer that to e-wallet. And then with that e-wallet, you can scan to pay like around Phuket for now, but I'm sure they will expand across Thailand, right? So that's a very, very good use case of how you don't have to worry about FX, right? Because you exchange crypto into Thai baht on the exchange table, so liquidity is always there. And when you exchange that to Thai baht, the FX is much more optimal than you go to exchange booth, right? So with that, you can just use baht and pay and spend like you're living in Thailand, like you're local people, right? So it is real time. Your money that you keep abroad in the wallet, somewhere else, can be converted to Thai baht and then use that in a very optimal FX rate, like you're living in Thailand. So I think that use case is going to apply in Da Nang as well, and hopefully in the future, the whole Vietnam as well, and
Also.
around the world as well.
Yeah, Randy?
Yeah, so if I could give, thank you. If I could give an example of liquidity in the traditional finance, right, private credit. So typically when you look at private credit, right, there is no liquidity, right? If you want to do a transaction, let's say it's a private note, a debt note, right? It's always off market. It's not easy, right, in the secondary market for you to in fact get liquidity. So how we solve that, right, is that we have a secondary trading platform. So when we listed our, investment note, which is a credit paper, right, on the platform, investors were then able to, in fact, transact with one another, right? And they were then able to get the liquidity. So the same thing would go for any kind of asset that you can tokenize, right? And so long as you have a fairly, liquid secondary trading platform, right? Then, that brings liquidity when asset class is typically illiquid in the past.
Maybe I'll go back to that arc that I was talking about earlier, which is coming to Vietnam and experiencing the local issues. Vietnam has so many motorbikes, and I was talking to some people in Ho Chi Minh City. They were discussing about the electrification goal of actually removing all of the gas-powered motorbikes and then having them all electric within 2 to 3 years. And then I'm thinking that this is great for the environment, right? Potentially, but it's also great for tokenization. If you look at Hong Kong, the market that I'm from, Hong Kong has a private market for investors who want to build electric charging stations. And so because of the nature of this asset, it's metered to a very high degree because of the IoT sensors. And the fact that the electricity, you can't necessarily store it unless you have a battery. So as it's created, you have to consume it, right? It's very different than other utilities like water and other commodity assets. And so because of that, then you can actually tokenize all of the various different elements that feed in from a utility perspective to a commercialization perspective and from an investment perspective. And so you can also incentivize the behavior of people to move to electric vehicles or electric scooters based on depend concepts. So all of the various different things that would be related to that. And then you could use the blockchain infrastructure. You ought to, you have to, you need to get that done. And then you can easily make a case for artificial intelligence to monitor the volumes of data that come into this specific private market use case. Now, the other interesting thing, which from a financial instrument perspective that you can think about, there's a ceiling to this. So there's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many motorbikes you can crowd around one charging station. And so there's a cap as to the yield of this very specific asset class. And so from that perspective, the market has to figure out derivatives to make this asset class useful. And I think that's where you're going to start finding a lot of innovation and a lot of very interesting products that we created in Vietnam around this one very specific policy initiative.
Yeah, we can see like there are many like rising opportunities in the market. I think let's go to the execution. So I have one question for you, Edith. This one, I think you will be one of the best. I trust you can answer. It's about security. Like I have friends working in BFSI sectors and the attendees to this event, and there will be question that they work. I think the major matter of concern of them is just like when it comes to blockchain based technology, man. they consider is less security than traditional systems. Right. So, how do you think about that, and how can banks can mitigate the risk? Like, because I see like in recent 2 years we have like some banks and some financial institution here in Vietnam. They come to us. They ask for our ideas, our consultation about like what would be the risks about it. The most popular questions and how to adopt this. But like I would like to bring this to the first. Yeah.
Sure. So security, right? I understand the question is about security, but I'm going to touch a little bit on risk as well, right? Because I'll give an example of how the regulator structured this in Thailand, right? So they are very clear that as an exchange, broker, fund manager, license, they have to keep 90% of their total asset in co-wallet, right? And it has to be in third-party licensed custodian, right? Sadly, custodian license came last, right? Because when you build the digital asset crypto business, you have to start with exchange. You need to create the business first, right? So you start with exchange, broker, fund manager. When you have all these players, then you worry about custody. But the rule is to keep 90% of the total asset in co-wallet, right? For security reason, in third-party custodian, for segregation of control, right? We see what happened with FTX when they keep the asset themselves and they mismanage their clients. So that's the security part. Although when the clients withdraw asset, you need liquidity, right? You need to be able to support them to be able to withdraw real time. So the regulator actually allowed 10% to be kept in the hot wallet self-custody, right? So when their clients withdraw, they can just let the asset go right away, and they rebalance the asset all the time, right? So this is risk management. This is like proper risk management. In terms of us, we handle the 90% of the total asset, and of course, no exchanges would keep 100% in one custodian, right? So you have to separate into multiple custodian. How we do it as a custodial core wallet provider. So all our signing device are offline air gap. So we kept the signing device in the security vault, which has to be fingerprint into the vault to get the signing device, right? And the vaults actually are kept in the secure room where our operation will have to scan their face before they get into the room, right? So that's multiple layers of security. Also, nobody at 𝗓𝗏 can initiate transaction for clients, right? So that's another layer of risk management and security. All the transaction has to be created by clients only. It has to be created from the mobile phone that they register, and it has to be that one because it register like biometrics. And the clients has to also create admin quorum, so it has to be more than 2 people, right? So there are multiple layers of security. Although we have a lot of security layers, but I'll have to say we were tried to be hacked as well. It was very exciting. It was not fun. It's actually the same group that hacked 1.5 billion from one of the exchanges. So I got call from FBI in one morning during token in Singapore, saying that there's a hacker from North Korea trying to hack your vault. And then we like rush and check everything. Luckily, we put 2FA in everything, right? So I think one of the developers' machine got compromised, but they cannot access anything because it requires 2-factor authentication in everything. So that's all they can do. So we basically locked that laptop, that machine, and we just like, destroy it. So there's a lot of security measures, and you have to combine with risk management as well. So yeah, it's a lot of work.
Let me hear your voice, Randy and Jen.
Yeah, so in Malaysia, right, anyone that operates a tokenized platform, right, must and they are licensed by the securities regulator. So you need to adhere to all of the regulations that is applicable, right? to licensed entities. So similar to Bank Negara, right? The capital markets regulator also has got what is called as a GTRM, right? The Group Technology Risk Management Framework. So all tokenization platforms, digital exchanges will have to comply with that. And so, right, so that obviously, ensures that all of these platforms that are operating, right, does adhere to adequate standards of security. That's one. The other also, right, we are actually a public permission platform, right? So I think that banks and all that, as you start off, right, you will always, gravitate towards a centralized model that obviously provides you with greater control and, also greater, risk management, if I may say so, before you actually, move on and become a DeFi, right? So that you learn through that experience and, you would be more comfortable, yeah? I think, choosing the right cloud operator is also very important, right? So for example, we are on AWS, right? So, and we also have a, 24-hour security operations center, right? So in addition to all the internal controls, the multi-factor authentication, all that you have, right? In addition to that, being on the right, on the right cloud platform that can provide you with that adequate level of security. I mean, I must say that AWS is a very strong firewall, right? And, we have a 24-hour security operations center monitor. So there are thousands of attacks actually, right? But the good thing today is that, with the combination of, human controls and technology, right? All these are actually risks that can be addressed. So if you look at, what is different with this compared to a securities exchange, right? All exchanges actually are subject to the same risk, right? They all actually, they dematerialize, right? They actually safekeep everything that's listed there, and they're subjected to the same risk. So I don't think, through this we are creating, through the use of blockchain, right? You're creating a new risk, so to speak, right? The risk has always been there. But obviously, right, when you go on to multiple chains and your DeFi, then, you need to also be able to manage the risk that comes along with that. Yeah.
Because we do not have a lot of time left, so I have this one question for you, Jeff. So, what would be your advice on the initial steps that BFSI attendees study should take to bring a digital asset into their offerings?
Well, I think you should talk to a foundation. If you, just kidding. I see a lot of BFSI companies, and mainly because I was on the Web 2 side before advising banks on how to do digital transformation, like core banking solutions. And there's a heavy focus on, obviously, the risk management, the risk profile and whatnot within the bank. But then usually you have the innovation department trying to work with the business team to figure out how to actually implement a new technology. I would challenge the BFSI community and the banks to don't do that with blockchain, because you're not going to be able to take a tech-focused approach to solve a business problem. And I'll give it a quick example, like for example, for custody, right? If you get into this mindset of, okay, so should I use HSM or MPC? And then you go down this rabbit hole of just technical what ifs. And the business can't decide because they don't understand what you're talking about in the innovation department. And the IT department can't help you because there are rules and regulations, and the way that their standard operating procedures are set up, it's not designed to support any type of things that deviate out of that control. And so the recommendation is have a environment that you set up that you can actually target a market that you are willing to actually take to production. Don't do a use case that goes to nowhere. And I think talking to the community, talking to platforms and custodians like everybody we have here today is a good first step. And then once you're ready, then think about where you are on the journey of risk. And if your risk profile is so stringent, then you're probably some type of private permissioned or public permissioned infrastructure makes sense. If you have the ability to actually test the waters even more with government support, and the government support comes from providing standards, because once you have standards, then you can actually test permissionless technologies more. So that's another thing that's actually on the government, that the government has to provide. And so, or regulators, I should say. And so that's my recommendation. And then come and talk to the foundation afterwards.
Thank you. So briefly,
Sorry, if I could add into that,
for sure,
right?
for sure. Yeah.
I would recommend to start with real use case, right? And start with what problem are you trying to solve, right? So then you start with the needs, right? Instead of just like what Jeff said, right? Don't stuck with technology, and don't try to build everything yourself. I think that's very legit, right? That's a lot of people who already done it leverage on that, right? So I think that would lead to good success.
And I think, regulatory clarity is very important, right? Without regulatory clarity, right, you obviously will not be, especially for banks, right? I think, the risk management is very, very stringent, right? A lot more than for non-banks. So, but generally regulatory clarity is important. Like Malaysia, right, we're able to move forward because there's regulatory clarity. Because otherwise your ecosystem partners also will not participate. Investors will also be hesitant and you cannot scale up.
Thank you all panelists. So I think that's for the first panel, and then we'll have presentation of 𝗘𝘃𝗲𝗿𝗆𝗍, followed by a panel 2. Then we'll together again. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank you, guys.
attention. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much, our panelists, for the insightful sharing, right? Everybody, how do you feel right now? Why are you smiling? Anybody here, do you want to share some thought after our first panel discussions? Do you think that really insight for you guys to make something or to do something or to start something? And after this, do you know where should you start? Like that, as our panel discussions, our panel speaker mentioned, don't start from nowhere. Where should we start? Where should we start? Can somebody answer this again? Where should we start? Or do you think it's insightful enough to start things and any? Okay, so I think you guys need a little bit more and engagement and powerful keynotes. We will bring you the powerful keynotes. Let's welcome again on the stage Miss Russia, with her over 27 years of experience in Russia, Malaysia. She will give us some practical case studies and practical lesson from the world of capital markets and tokenized securities. And it will offer you a lot of insightful, powerful, tailored to the Vietnam BFSI landscape. Please join me in welcoming again on stage Miss Russia.
Hi, so you have me again, right? So I'm just going to give you some insights actually onto, 𝗘𝘃𝗲𝗿𝗆𝗍 itself, right? So it's, in a way, it's a use case for you, right? So it's a use case, right? So we actually are a multi-asset platform, as I mentioned, that is licensed and regulated by the Securities Commission Malaysia. I brought into 𝗘𝘃𝗲𝗿𝗆𝗍, right? Obviously, a lot of my own experience, right, from the traditional world. So it's marrying, of the TradFi, right, into the blockchain world, right, and hopefully into DeFi in time to come. Yeah. So it's good to know that many of the audience here are very familiar, right, with tokenization, right? So for those of you who are familiar, you would notice that it is actually disrupting traditional finance, but it's doing that in a very, very positive way. So since most of you here are from banks, right, you will notice that a lot of the major banks actually, have made moves into this whole area of tokenization. So Morgan Stanley, for example, right, they back tokenization through an investment in a US-based company called 𝗘𝘃𝗲𝗍𝗆𝗍. Goldman Sachs launched its own tokenization platform, and close to our home, DBS actually, has established, its own tokenization platform that is known as DBS Digital. they've also actually issued a bond actually on that platform, right? So the Singapore government obviously has been very, very active in the space, right, in the region, right? So you see a lot of, activities in Singapore, right? And, if you look at what is the projection like for the tokenized market, BCG puts it at 16 trillion, right, by the year 2020. You'll also notice the large asset managers, such as BlackRock, KKR, Hamilton Lane, all of them have actually gone into tokenization, tokenized funds, right, and are continuing to tokenize. So you wonder, right, why is it like someone like BlackRock, for example, right, does tokenization, yeah? And the reason for them to do it is because they want to reach out to new classes of investors. So as I mentioned just now, right, there's a generational shift also that's taking place, and a lot of younger, wealthier investors are out there as well. So they want to be able to tap onto this new segment and continue to grow as well. Yeah. So what are the factors that is driving tokenization globally, right? One is, of course, increasingly regulators are coming out with regulatory framework. In order for tokenization, to gain a strong foothold and grow, right? A market like Vietnam, you will definitely need to have clarity on the regulatory framework. So how have regulators world over approached this, right? What they've actually done is that they have, in a way, retrofitted, right, the traditional finance into this tokenization world. That means if you're going to tokenize something, right, let's say you want to tokenize a bond, in the first place, you must comply with all of the regulatory requirements that is currently applicable to bonds, right? So if you want to do equity, you apply with all the current requirements for an equity. So if you want to do a fund, you apply all the current requirements. So in that way, the regulator does not have to come up with a whole set of requirements. Yeah. So this is the approach that has been taken in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in Malaysia, right? Because it doesn't make sense, right, to have two different sets of rules, right? One for tokenized, another for non-tokenized. So the thing to remember is tokenization is nothing more than a digital representation of an underlying asset on blockchain. Okay, it's just a digital representation. Today you buy things in the stock market, it's all digital, correct? So similarly here, right, it's digital, it's called token because it's on blockchain, right? But of course, the blockchain itself brings a lot of benefits that you had heard from the panel before. So that is the difference. So this underlying securities laws will not change. So if you're going to issue a bond or a fund, right, it'll all remain the same. So that's where, right, so for the banks here, right, when you want to do products, right, you will continue to comply with the similar underlying requirements that is required to issue a bond or a fund. It's just that it's being delivered in a different manner, right, that enables a lot of efficiency to come about, some of which I'll talk about shortly. Yeah. So in Malaysia, right, what's happening is that, our securities regulator, that is Securities Commission, as well as the central bank, Bank Negara, right, are both giving a strong push to tokenization as well as digital assets. So as a result of which, of course, today, right, a lot more banks, a lot more asset managers are taking an interest. So banks obviously will be very sensitive to the queue from the central bank. So similarly in Vietnam, right, unless the central bank actually provides the queue, right, and sends out that very clear guidance, typically you'll find that banks will not on their own, right, go and undertake this sort of adoption, because they all have got licenses and they need to comply with their license requirements. So in Malaysia, what's happening is that the regulator is giving the strong push, and you see the same thing in Singapore as well as in Hong Kong. So in this respect, I want to touch on this whole area of private markets, right, because that's where in the traditional financial world, right, tokenization is being used, right. So what you find globally is that private markets have been actually growing very, very significantly, right? So they call that the newest, the new shiniest thing, right? In the world of investment today. So a lot of funds, right? A lot of investors are chasing after good deals, right? In private markets. So just an introduction to 𝗘𝘃𝗲𝗿𝗆. I'm not sure why it's mangled there a bit. Sorry about that, right? But we are a multi-asset private markets platform, right? We onboard both investors as well as issuers, and we actually match them, right? Now, as I mentioned earlier, right, and as the panelists also mentioned, when you want to do this, right, you must have a problem statement. So our problem statement lie in the fact that there's a huge funding gap. I think even in Thailand, you have a very huge funding gap for the SMEs. Yeah. So that's where platforms like this, right, can actually address the funding needs. So when a lot of the mid-tier companies, etc., right, do find challenges. So that's where things like PE, VC, and all are in there, but it's simply not enough in Malaysia. So that's where we saw the opportunity, right, to bring in a platform like KLDX to address the funding gap. Now, interestingly, in Malaysia, we have 2.7 trillion cash that is sitting in the banking and in the bank accounts, right? Actually, Malaysian banks do pay quite a high deposit, right? It's about, for individuals, it's 3%. So it's quite high, yeah? So a lot of them actually keep their money in the banks. And so this is where, right, private markets can come in and tap onto that liquidity that's there. Now, we are a one-stop center. So when you develop a platform of this nature, right, it cannot be exactly like your traditional platform. You must overcome some of the issues, some of the problems that you have faced, right, or your customers have faced. So that's where, right, we looked at what are all the problems that people face, right, and we come up with a one-stop center. So if you want to raise funds, you just come to the platform, everything gets done there, right? The origination, the distribution, as well as the asset servicing. So we do everything, right? So it's efficient then, for the company, and it's also lower cost. Now, a lot of companies don't have reach to investors, yeah? But when you come onto a platform, you have a broader reach. So for Vietnam companies, right, you may be attractive to your domestic market, you may also be attractive to your international market. Not everyone can go onto the Hanoi, the Ho Chi Minh Stock Exchange, right? So then that's where you can go onto a platform, right, and you can have that broader reach. And this also, of course, enables a company, right, to build a pipeline, right, towards its own exchanges. And for investors, of course, they can then participate, in these asset classes and also have liquidity. Now, as you are aware, right, I mean, private markets tend to outperform the public markets, so there's huge opportunity there, yeah. So this slide actually shows, right, KLDX and how comprehensive we are, maybe in comparison to an investment bank right at the end. So you can just take a look at your both left and right, and you can see that we are fairly comprehensive, right, that we've got many different licenses and we can do the entire value chain, right. So one thing that, investment banks may not have really is a secondary market capability. So even when you buy bonds in the market today, everything is dealt with OTC, right? Whereas here, it is listed and there's actually actual price discovery that takes place, yeah? So we've got the primary market, right? So a platform can have primary. This is where the origination, similar to IPO, that takes place, right? Then it gets custodized and then it gets listed for secondary trading. Yeah, so if you like, right, it's very similar to your stock exchange. It's just that this is, if you like, a platform that caters for the smaller private market assets. And depending on the regulation, right, in Malaysia, we allow a broad range of investors. So you can't see the words there, but it's actually retail, angel, high net worth institution. So we can deal with a broad range of asset classes. Yeah, we welcome foreigners to open an account as well. So if you want to experience a platform, you can actually go on to our web and actually open an account. It's under 10 minutes, right? All you need is your passport to open accounts. You can also buy products on our platform. Now, so this is the team, right? Our team actually comes largely, almost everyone there comes from the capital markets. So we're very strong in capital markets. Why? Because, see, when you assemble a team, you must be very clear what you want to do. So we were very clear what we want to deal with is traditional finance, tokenizing traditional financial documents, right? Such as bonds, sukuk, equity and all that. So that's why our team actually comprises of people from the capital markets in themselves, yeah. So we've got more than 100 years of experience there. So the team is absolutely important. If you are going to succeed, you need to bring in a broad range of, players, right, into the team and a supportive board. So this is actually, right, Malaysia's funding landscape, if you like. And I think it may be similar for many markets, right? So when you look at it, right, okay, so what we found, I call it the value of death, right? Because in Malaysia, what we find is that 10 to 50 million is where a lot of companies fall off. They cannot raise that funding, 10 to 50 million. When they're looking to scale up, then they either stagnate or they die, right? So that's the space, the mid space where we operate in. So every market will have its gap. So in Vietnam, for example, you must see where is the gap, where is the funding gap, right? And then you come and address that particular funding gap. So we've successfully launched the world's first, tokenized Sharia compliant fixed income. So Many of you may be aware of Malaysia's expertise when it comes to Sharia, right? So we are the largest and the leading jurisdiction for sukuk in the world, right? So we have, actually we've got the largest bond market in Southeast Asia, as well as unit trust market in Southeast Asia, right? And so of course we have got natural, advantages when it comes to sukuk, any kind of Sharia. So whilst the platform is not completely Sharia focused, we have the ability, right, to bring Sharia products. So so we are very attractive to many Sharia markets. So we were featured in the Global Islamic FinTech Report, for example, right, as democratizing access. So we do have a lot of interest coming from, let's say, the Middle East, etc., right? They're very keen on our platform, right? So this is actually a 150 million program over a period of 7 years. So to date, we've actually raised about 50 million for them. We're helping them actually with the establishment of rehabilitation centers. So they've built three rehabilitation centers. They're looking at building a total of 5 rehabilitation centers, right? So it's similar to a bond, right? But for smaller companies in Malaysia, you can issue what is known as an investment note, right, which is less complex, lower cost compared to bonds. And we had, interestingly, right, we had both institutional as well as individual investors participating in that, right? So we have done a total of 7 issuance of that, and we have also done the asset servicing. So on the platform, we also do the distribution of the coupon. We do the redemption. We also do any kind of communication to investors. Yeah, so it's a one-stop center. So the next product that we are bringing is actually a book retailer, right? They are very interesting model, right, where they actually operate in the remainder book industry, and where they do actually exhibitions, and that's the main way in which their revenue model is being derived. So 50% of the income comes from Malaysia, another 50 comes from the ASEAN region, right? Incidentally, they say they want to come into Vietnam, right? But the censorship is very strong. So, to date, they've not been able to come, right? But they are very big in Indonesia, in Thailand, in the Philippines. They sell books at 50 to 80% discount to the price that you find in bookshops. Their mission is actually really to bring English literacy to the world, right? So they typically, work in, markets which are developing, yeah? So that's the issuer profile that we have, right? We have got about 650 million, right, ringgit worth of order book there, right, which we intend to bring to market. We will be actually bringing our first tokenized bond sometime in September, October this year, right? So this slide depicts our evolution, where we started in 2023. You will have to go through a lot of investor education in a market and market education. So when we first started, right, a lot of people were not aware what is tokenization, and they often confuse that with crypto assets. Of course, when FTX occurred, right, there was a lot of aversion, right? Anything that was blockchain was bad. But of course, then people soon realized that there's a difference between technology and a product and an exchange. So yeah, there's a lot of investor education that needs to take place. So that's the evolution that we went through. And these are all the different asset classes. So if you're looking at what are the different asset classes, right, that you can bring in, right? It's equity, right? It's bonds, sukuk, private funds, commodities, real estate. So there's a broad range of asset classes that can actually be brought. We're also working on some real estate tokenization, right? Especially in markets where not everybody can afford to own real estate. I think there's a good use case for real estate tokenization, where you can own a small part, right, of a real estate and still benefit, right, from the capital appreciation and the returns that comes along with owning. You can also have rent to own concepts. So a lot of things that you can do, right, when it comes to property and tokenization. Now, I think there was a discussion as well on ecosystem. So it's very, very important. You cannot do everything on your own. So if you're going to succeed as a platform, you've got to build the ecosystem. So you've got to work with a broad range of people, right? So it depends, right, on what you're seeking to do, and you will then accordingly build your ecosystem. We built our ecosystem. Obviously, it's a very, very time-consuming process, and you need a lot of tenacity, right, and energy. And for banks, obviously, right, it's got to be driven from the top, and there's got to be a lot of support internally. Otherwise, you'll give up halfway. Yeah. We actually have a collaboration with other exchanges as well, right? So because we are scaling up regionally. The whole idea is to actually have at some point, right, a connection between all of the different platforms in the ASEAN region, right? So that we can perhaps one day in the distant future have a single board, right, of the different products that is coming from the ASEAN region. I don't think it's utopian. I think that is really achievable if, because today technology is enabling it. When I was in the stock exchange, we tried to do that, but the technology cost was simply too high for the ASEAN markets to do that, right? Whereas what I find is that with blockchain, right, and perhaps also with the use of stablecoin, all this is actually a real possibility. Yeah. Yeah, so these are the regional opportunities. We are currently looking at the GCC region, as I mentioned, right? Okay, so we also have a strong focus on green, right? We can enable green, and that's where, right, with your green bond and all that, there's great opportunity to use blockchain as a smart contract, right? To actually automate a lot of the governance and compliance requirements, that comes along with having green products, yeah? So that's it. I've come to the end of my presentation, right? Happy to answer any questions that anyone has. Around the room, any questions? Okay, otherwise, back to the MC.
Okay, so thank you again, Mrs. Russia, for your insightful keynotes. I also note something, right? We should stand in some gaps and we should build the ecosystem. Is that right? Do you want to summarize
yes.
The whole speech? The season named keynotes. Can you summarize me like 3 to 5 keynotes that we should remember when we want to start in this BFSI landscape in Vietnam?
Yeah. So I think, it depends on whose perspective you look at, right? I think from the country perspective, it's actually very important to have clarity in terms of the regulatory framework. It all starts there. So in Malaysia, it started with the regulator issuing a set of guidelines. Yeah, they issued a prescription order and a guidelines. Because if there is no regulatory framework, right, then you cannot have the orderly development of tokenization, right? And you see, if you are, all of these products, right, have investor protection implications, and they are actually regarded as security, right? So if they're falling within the ambit of the securities laws, right, even as a platform operator, if you were to do it, then you'd be running foul of the laws, right, of the country. So that's one, regulatory clarity. The other is, of course, ensuring that there's adequate understanding, right, in the community itself. So to that extent, right, the market education, the investor education is very, very important. For banks, for example, right, the biggest challenge you will have is internal buy-in, because I talk to a lot of banks, yeah. So in the beginning, right, you'll find that there will be quite a lot of lack of understanding, right? And that lack of understanding translates into fear, right? And the unknown risks. So, you've got to start, at various levels. You've got to engage at the board level, right? And then, of course, at the management level, and then at the working level. So if you are serious about this, the first thing I would do is really to start on that investor education. But you see, board will also ask, why are we doing this? One is, right, irrespective of whether you're going to go into this or not, this is a global trend that you need to know, because these are the competitive threats that you are going to be faced with, right? Somebody else may come and eat your lunch tomorrow. You do not know, right? So you need to know. That's one. The other, of course, is that you got to see whether there is a use case for you. There's no point doing this if there's no use case. What exactly is your use case? And is there market demand, for that use case? So if, there's market demand for the use case, the regulatory framework is there, then, you've got the perfect recipe. Then, of course, banks, of course, you don't need to talk about resources. You've got to have your budget allocation, right? And, education of the ecosystem is important, because as a bank, right, you also have got a lot of other people that you deal with, your trustees, your custodians, your lawyers, right? So all of these people actually have to be brought into the ecosystem, the accountants, because otherwise, you cannot take this off. Yeah, so that's my summary, if you like, Madam MC.
Okay, thank you so much. And I hope that our guest today will have some notes and be well prepared, because as Mr. Russia said, the chance will be everywhere, even in this room. After this, we can reconnect together. But I think that we might want to hear more and more share from Ms. Russia, Ms. Jeff, and Mr. Atit, right? So let's welcome again our panelists on the stage to the next panelist, panel discussion number 2 innovating with digital assets, opportunities, and future trends. Please welcome again on the stage Mr. Jeff, Mr. Atit, and Ms. Russia, and our moderators, Mr. Frank.
Check. Okay, we meet again. Oh, where's my Jeff?
I said correctly this
Okay,
time.
is that yeah. Just kidding. Okay, so I think thank you guys for staying to listen about like panel 2. So I think I will go straight to the questions because I would like to have more time for the Q&A parts. And I have this question like, well, what innovative financial products can BSSI firms create using tokenized assets such as securities or portfolios? Like, Rainy, can you please help me with that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think to begin with, right, you have to always remember when you want to do a product, right, who is your customer and what is it that the customer wants. Customers actually have challenges coping with many different innovations all at one go, right? So, if you are starting, I would say, right, start with products which people are familiar with, right? Because, when you say tokenization, already they're confused. Hey, what is this tokenization? How does it work? What's the risk? La-di-da. Then if you go and put a very complex product, then the second level of complexity, right? So, my advice would be, right, always start off with traditional products, right? Because as I said, there's a lot of people who don't have access to even traditional products, right? Like, private equity, VC funds, some of the private funds, bonds, and all that, and shares of private companies. Okay, but beyond that, right, when you're looking at, looking at products which are innovative, right? So then I would say that the innovation comes in the use of the underlying asset. So if you look at a lot of SMEs, right, a lot of these SMEs actually don't have real estate that they can use as collateral when they want to actually borrow. So what do you then do? So then you become more innovative and you look at the nature of the business, right? So you look at their cash flow, you look at the receivables. So then you can say that, okay, let me do an investment note where I securitize the receivables, right? So that's an example, right, of how, you can do an innovative product. Of course, there are things like utility token that you can do, right, where you give, where you do a token and you, so let's say, you have an F&B group that wants to raise monies, right? So they issue a token and they give a share of their revenue, for example, right? So you give certain economic rights that's associated with that. So, but when you're doing like real estate, right, there's an opportunity for actually innovation there. So if let's say, you are doing an apartment block and, you're financing that apartment block through the issuance of a token, right? And you want to enable, the younger generation, for example, that may not have enough resources to actually participate and buy. They may not have enough deposit now, right? But 2 years down the road, I get promoted, I earn more, my wife earns more, I can get a bank loan. Yeah. So you can have tokens that actually, lease to own concept through a token, right? Where, if you buy X number of tokens and you hold them, right, you are given the first preference, to actually acquire that unit, but it comes along with you committing to rent, for example. So there are many permutations, right, that you can build in. So it really depends on the use case. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's because of the use of smart contract, right? Not that it cannot be done in the traditional world, it can be done, but it's very, administratively, operationally cumbersome. Yeah, tracking, the record keeping, etc. But of course, being a blockchain and what do you call this? Using smart contracts, these become a lot more efficient. And also, right, people don't get stuck because you can list it for secondary trading. If I choose to change my mind, then obviously I can go and I can sell, and I get my money, right? As opposed to in the traditional sense where you won't have access to that. So yeah, there's actually a lot more that I can we can talk about, but in the interest of time, I think I'll stop here.
Yeah, Edith, you have any idea?
Sure. I echo that, right? I think start with purpose, right? Start with the use case. Start with what problem are you trying to solve, right? That's a lot of things to be tokenized, right? Are you focusing to do that for investment, or are you focusing on doing that to solve payment problem, for example, right? With that, let's just stick with investment or payment, right? Those payments probably the biggest topic that people are talking about right now. Uh, I'll give an example of Thailand again because there's a lot of use case happening right now. Thailand also took a very big step, waiving capital gain tax for all digital asset, including tokenized asset, including crypto, for 5 years, right? That's a really, really big step. And they are tokenizing Thai baht government bond, which they give 2% yield, which is, clients can hold unlimited tokens and they can earn 2% on the total amount of their money, where previously they earned less than 1% for the higher amount of their money, their portfolio, right? There's also discussion about CBDC or tokenized Thai baht stable coins, where with that, you use it for different purpose, right? You solve payment problem, so I think it came back to the principle, right? What problem are you trying to solve? Are you trying to create a new investment vehicle, or are you trying to solve, payment problem or helping people's life to be better? So with that, then you choose the right underlying asset, right? And underlying securities, underlying asset to be correct for the tokenized asset that you want to do, right? So that's my thought.
I met like some DeFi founders out there, and they gave me a question, and I would love to have here, Jeff. Like they asked about like is there any chance for them so they can work with like BFSI firms integrate their DeFi solution with them? Is there any?
I think one of the core things that Ronnie was speaking about consistently was licensed activities, regulated activities, and then unregulated activities, right? So, fortunately or unfortunately, as a startup, if you're going to be working with a bank, you're a technology provider, you're a solution provider. So regulators don't necessarily interested to speak with you as much as the regulated actor. So first and foremost, you have to understand the positioning as a builder, right? And so if that's what the value proposition is, then you need to figure out the problem statement for the bank. Banks right now, and this is in general, banks make money off of what's known as API banking. All the different calls, the fees that move money transactions from one system to another system, that's where they get the fees off of. That's how they make their money, right? The other way they make money is fractionalized reserve lending. What that means is they borrow money from central banks or wholesale banks, then they keep your money in a bank account, they give a portion of your money to somebody else, and then they charge interest on the money that they lend out. But they don't actually have to keep all of the money that backs up the loan that they give to like someone who wants to buy a home or pay for a student loan. And so if you think of it like that, then that's another use case. You think like, okay, so tokenized deposits, and then what as a technology provider can I help a bank to get to that next Web3 version of a core business that they're already running? So that's just my recommendation, right? Just don't reinvent the wheel. Just look at how things are done today, and then work with the bank to understand the problem from their perspective, and then offer them a Web3 solution. And if you need support, like the foundation's here to help you, right? So, and then partners here on stage as well. So, yeah.
So let's get back to BFSI first. So, because we can see like actually even as Varmeta, we receive like a lot of like requests from banks and some financial services providers here in Vietnam. They want us to consult about like tokenization, real estate. So yeah, like now Vietnam we have like a lot of real estate projects, and it go back to surging trend again, and I believe it will become like much more popular than before, like in the next years. So the question would be like, how can like tokenized real assets like can transform like investment opportunities in Vietnam? Yeah, yeah. So Ethic, can you help me with that?
Sure. I was going to pass to Rani because that's her topic, but I can share a little bit, right? So in Thailand, there's a project called 𝗕𝗷𝗃𝗍, right? There's a token called 𝗕𝗷𝗃𝗍, where it's tokenized by a company called tokenization, which is in the same group as us. So it basically tokenized three luxury condominiums in Bangkok, where Rani's mentioned that you probably won't be able to earn everything in or even a one unit, right? But you can actually buy the token and you hold fractional of the condominium project, right? So what the project is doing is they rent out some of those units that they couldn't sell the unit, and they put this into a project, tokenize into a token, have clear, proper guaranteed return for a certain period of years. And then people can, buy this token. They can buy from ICO when they first launch, and later on they can also buy in the secondary market, like in the crypto exchange. So it actually opened up opportunity for people to invest in different asset class. Instead of earning low yield, safe yield on money market funds or bonds, they can earn like 5 to 6 or 7% on different asset class, help them to diversify their portfolio. Ready?
I think it really depends on what exactly is the problem that is being faced, right? So if it is one where developers are finding it difficult to in fact get financing, right, to do property development, because maybe the bank's quota is already up, let's say, right? So in that instance, yes, you can actually use tokenization as a means to raise funds in order to do the development. So that also actually provides investors an opportunity to earn returns from real estate beyond REITs. So, typically when you do tokenization real estate, right, you need to be able to provide returns to the holder of token beyond REITs. Because otherwise investors will say, why do I want to buy this? I might as well buy the REITs. REITs are a lot more liquid, right? So there must be some added benefit. So some of the use cases that I've seen, like one that I'm working on is the fact that, the developer has a piece of land and they want to actually undertake a certain development, but they cannot get the financing. And actually even large developers have liquidity issues, right? In fact, most of the time large developers are the ones who will have it because they have maxed up their loans with the banks, right? And they've got many developments going on at the same time. So they want to then issue a token, but they're going on a lease to own. So which means, within a 5-year period, right, they would actually be selling whatever asset that is comprised under that program. So if they are developing apartments, right, then those apartments will be fully sold by the 5 years. So the IRR, right, for an investor should be anything above 8%. At the same time, you give an opportunity to them to own the property. So it can actually have the effect of enabling developers to have access to financing. It can also have the effect of enabling people to own homes because most of the time you find young people, right, after 2-3 years they will have the ability, but in the beginning they don't, right? So that's where you can structure that. It can also enable a situation where, let's say, there's a lot of stock and cannot be cleared. Sometimes there's a glut in the market, right? So you can also then securitize that, right? To do a REIT structure in the stock exchange is you must have capitalization and a lot of revenue requirements, right? But here you can also securitize those stocks, right? Provide some returns and slowly clear them out. So in that way, developer is actually achieving liquidity to be able to carry on their business. So yeah, I mean there are many ways in which it can be positive towards the property market in any country.
Okay, so today, there are some banks coming here, and they also ask us about can you please give them some advice on who should they partner with, the strategy on the technology, the resources, including tech talents, some sort of things, because I see there's some unclear plan is hindering them from entering this digital asset space. Yeah. So Jeff, can you have any idea with this?
I hope no one from Big Four or Accenture or anybody, BCGX is here. Don't go to a big company to tell you how to do small company innovation. So I'm not saying you won't get good answers. You should pay a lot of money. You could have tried many other things. So that's the first recommendation. The second recommendation, I think I spoke about this earlier, and I was in Da Nang yesterday. There was a government conference up there speaking about sandbox and how you can have innovation inside a sandbox. I don't entirely agree with sandbox innovation. I think what should be done instead is have very specific pilots that solve problems for your bank, in which you can use innovations in process, technology, and people and talent, and propose that back to the government for evaluation. It's very similar to what and how VARA in the UAE works. So it's an activity-based regulation versus specifically structured kind of rulebook type approach. So I would recommend that as a bank if you're looking for that open innovation approach, to not go through a consultant to give you options that you pick off a menu, and really challenge yourself to identify your own problems internally, and then experiment, and then propose that as something that can be regulated. And then the third thing I would recommend is join a Web3 industry association to learn, to contribute, and to participate. Because I think one thing in Vietnam specifically I've experienced so far is that they're very open to consultation. There's very little time before the law is active on January 1st, the crypto law. And there's a lot of pieces that you need to be in place, irrespective if it's like a IFC or if it's going to be your traditional market. You have to have these infrastructure pieces in place, from regulatory compliance, aligning banks and custodians, et cetera. And so I think it's really important to participate in an industry association to work these things out as an industry to update the government. So those are my recommendations.
Yeah, so what I would recommend is, perhaps, more baby steps from the perspective of, working together, right, with existing parties in the ecosystem, right? So often, right, for a bank to start an initiative can be a mammoth exercise. So the easier thing to do, right, is to perhaps, work with another fintech. And I think that's actually a very healthy approach to take, right, where you do support the ecosystem in which you are operating. Because a lot of the fintech players, right, have very innovative ideas, and they are more nimble and they can move much faster. Because, many of these new things, because I come from a very traditional organization in the past, right? And when I was a chief commercial officer, I tried to, actually propose a lot of innovation. It always gets blocked, right? You got to go through the 10 committees, and someone up there will suddenly play God and say, no, it's not happening. Yeah. And so, no, it's not easy actually, to bring about innovation in very traditional companies, unless, of course, the board is extremely focused and sets aside a separate team, right? Because there are a lot of legacy issues that you will need to deal with. So the easier thing for you to do to leapfrog, which actually I see, right, happening with a lot of the large banks globally, is to actually work with one or two of the fintech players, right, that meets your needs. So you need to determine what's your need, right? And then you can actually support the fintech players in many ways, right? So you could either take an equity stake, or you can collaborate with them on a project, or as Jeff says, do a pilot on something with them. So I think that supportive ecosystem is very important. And that is going to be the key to success, because a bank doesn't have all the expertise. A bank cannot do everything, right? And banks are also extremely risk averse. So, it sometimes it's best to be nurtured outside as opposed to be nurtured inside.
I agree with both of you. I worked with banks before. When I heard all those big consulting firms coming for this project, my first question is, for real? Are they going to come and execute anything? At the end of the day, as a bank, you ended up doing the work yourself, right? Go go for small, nimble company like Varmeta. Give them opportunity, right? Give us opportunity. These guys are very innovative. These guys can move faster. In fact, they actually work harder than those big companies, right? Because need to be success, right? I think that's very important. Another thing I want to emphasize is, not just fintechs, right? I also think banks also move faster than regulators, right? So work with them, right? Try to understand them, guiding them to the right direction, right? Like I'll give a clear example, right? In every country, when they start regulating digital asset or crypto, again, they start with exchange, broker, fund manager, they're building the business, but they don't have a very clear or like the right framework for keeping the asset, right? They probably say, okay, exchange can keep the asset themselves at the beginning. They don't have to use third-party custodian, but be more forward thinking, right? Be more proactive. You can look outside, it's very easy. You can look into other countries, see what's the right structure, and then work with the regulator, right? It doesn't mean that when they tell you to do one thing, that's the right thing, right? Work with them, trying to educate them, and gearing into the right direction, right? So emphasizing on collaboration, I think that would drive into success.
I'd just like to echo, we have actually been working with Varmeta, right? They have helped us with the development of our own platform, and I have nothing but praises for them, right? They're very dedicated, right? And excellent service. Yeah, so I completely, agree with Atrit that, need to give the smaller players also a chance, and that's the way in which you grow, your own domestic, ecosystem.
Thank you, guys. I would love to maybe hear some voice from like the attendees. Hi guys, especially who works for like VFSI firms. So do you have any question for the panelists here? We are very happy to address your concern and maybe give some help if possible. Okay, so can someone?
The speaker mic.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to check. Sorry. Hello. I think it's great now. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I would like to thanks for all the speakers for all of your great and valuable sharing. So my question is related to the Vietnam market in the next few years. So like you can see that we have a very good side that the government, they are doing good with the legal rules. And maybe in the next year we might have the first Vietnamese đồng token for the first layer one. So what are your predictions and the opportunities that you can see for the Vietnam market in the next few years? And because in here I think we have all of the like bank, fintech, tech company, and also some government guys. So how can we work together to can like bring some great platform like 𝗘𝘅𝗰𝗲𝗶 to Vietnam and apply to the citizen? So I hope my question is clear.
Yeah. Maybe I start with an opportunity for the banks first, right? I've seen this in many other jurisdictions who open up regulations, who provide clarity for regulations or open up the market for Web3 activities. There's a potential flood of companies who want to come in and set up. The biggest challenge, and we talked about this at lunch, is opening a bank account. Because the bank has no way of actually assessing the risk of giving a bank account to doing KYB on a decentralized organization, right? And so that's the opportunity, to be completely honest, in the next 3 to 6 months, is for every Vietnamese bank who is interested in having exposure to this new government policy, is to do an internal stress test on how to actually give bank accounts out to Web3 companies. So I think that's a recommendation that's very easy for you to do. The other thing too, we talked about the payments, right? So the sandbox payment system from the stablecoin side, pretty cool. I use two apps. I can't name them on stage. I don't want to be promoting, but I used two apps in Da Nang. Pretty cool. Worked relatively. Still in. Speakers are. Oh, no, no. And so it is a really good test of how you can use digital payments and stablecoins tied with legacy rails. Legacy rails being you can actually take your credit card, link it up to a stablecoin deposit wallet, and you deposit your stablecoins, but then pay through that rail. That was really cool. I think expanding and testing these these technologies with like a small fintech companies, and then building out the ecosystem is a really good start as well.
So I think the wonderful thing about Vietnam is that the internet penetration is high, and also it's a very active crypto market, right? I mean, there's the crypto penetration is also very, very high. So which means that people are very familiar, right, with this whole concept, right, of blockchain and tokens and all that. So that then that means the demand is there, right? So it's just a supply. And so Vietnam also, right, having a huge SME base. I believe that you will have a similar problem like all other SME based markets, when there's a funding need. So I do foresee that in the years to come, right, security tokens can actually get a strong foothold, right, in the market. Given that there is you've got both the demand, as well as the supply side. I also do foresee that improvements in terms of the payment rails, right? Because the next step is always the use of things like stablecoin. And so given that like in Da Nang we already have what Jeff mentioned, like the ability to be able to use crypto, I would think that these sort of developments can actually be fast tracked in a market like this, right, where there appears to be a regulatory appetite as well as the savviness on the part of the users, right, to be able to use it.
I think you guys are very lucky. The government is already building the road, right? So when you have the road, and it's amazing, you guys can build anything on top of that, right? It can be tokenized anything. It could be alternative lending, borrowing. It could be alternative investment, payments. That lots of opportunity, right? And it's on the regulated aspect. Because right now, Vietnamese market is huge. And, we also talking to a few players. We want to enter this market as well. I think that's a huge market. There's a huge opportunity. There's a lot you can do. It open up to a lot of projects, builders who can actually build on this, blockchain layer one that the government is building. I think it's going to be a lot more as well, because 1st of January next year, they're going to regulate exchanges, right? Already have the names there. There'll be more business. There'll be more opportunity on that as well. When the market is running, you will see opportunity and you'll be able to build on top of that.
So have any more questions? Okay. So actually, I have this one. Like, I think that it can be said that I think it can be said that Vietnam has exceeded the gray area for blockchain, right? It can be said that. But things getting clearer now. But because you guys have experience and you worked in and maybe you lead this digital asset space. So can you please give like a picture of maybe what's going on, the pace, the opportunity, the risk, the rivals, the partners. I mean like like a map, the campaign for the BFSI firm, so they can see in the future and get more prepared for it. Yeah.
This is a huge opportunity, right? Vietnam is a huge market, and it's always been under the water. So a lot of unregulated players taking a lot of business, right? So I think two main reasons that the government and the regulator in Vietnam decided to bring this on the table. One is because a lot of people are getting scammed, right? I think they wanted to stop that, and I think this is the right thing that they do. Second is that's a huge business that running outside of Vietnam, and companies outside of Vietnam is taking the business. I think the regulator and the government want to bring this on the table. So players like banks or FI or even tech company can actually do it in Vietnam and keep the business and the revenue, the income in the country, right? I think this is great opportunity. I think you guys have to move fast to catch this wave. I think that's a huge opportunity out there.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, looking at it from a global perspective, right? With Donald Trump coming to power, right? And, the Genius Act, the Clarity Act, all that simply means that the big boys are going to go into the game even more, right? So, and that obviously, provides a lot more, opportunity for the players in Vietnam as well, right? Depending on the space that you want to be in, right? There's a lot more legitimacy that comes in, a lot more acceptance that comes in. What used to be gray is no more gray, especially with you see, the thing is, right, if you look at globally, if you look at regulation, market regulation, it's always driven from the north. Honestly, in the area of securities, it's always been driven there. So whenever the changes take place up there, it actually gets filtered down here as well. So you're going to see increasingly, a lot more, I think, right, liberalization that is going to enable, a lot more innovation, right, and adaptation, right, in this whole area of digital assets. So that's why you see you got to get yourselves ready, right, and take a look at where exactly is the opportunity for you. Of course, technology is continuing to evolve, right, and technology is also becoming cheaper, right? So and a lot of the unknown risks are also being addressed. So it's actually a good time, I think, to start if you've not started the journey.
Yeah, I think the opportunity is overall democratization of finance for everyone. That's the purpose of what the Bitcoin white paper wanted to push out for the masses. Well, what does that mean for a bank? Because banks normally, they have walled gardens. You have your territories that you've built products, services around. And really the tokenization, digitization, virtual assets, it disintermediates a lot of other, let's say, pre-existing kind of silos that had to be put in place, either for protection of customers or extraction of value within a system or a process. And so I think it's really rethinking that. The opportunity is to be able to rethink how the bank makes money, and then really embrace the open banking kind of concept. And where you, by sharing infrastructure, you actually generate more value than if every single bank had its own set of data centers and its own systems and whatnot. And one way of doing that, obviously, is with DLT technology. So that's really the opportunity. The other thing too, yeah, just to echo the geopolitical stuff, as the overall global market shifts a little bit away from a US dollar dominated kind of regime, to have access to other economic activities. So you have other markets like the UAE and a few other leading Web3 domicile plus regulatory framework, regulatory jurisdictions. And what they're providing is the ability to do proper tokenization from their and passport assets across. And so being able to work in corridors with these more leading Web3 let's say, jurisdictions and geographies is another very powerful opportunity if like the local Vietnamese banks start thinking about those partnerships.
If we can like look further, maybe in 3, even 5 or 10 years from now. So what will be the future trend for digital assets? So yes. So can you please share your thoughts about it?
Sure. My dream, and I'm sure it will happen, is to have a bank app where I can have both fiat bank account and digital asset bank account, right? So, and that, I mean, it's still centralized finance, but it gives the clients actually free of choice, right? It gives them freedom to choose whatever they want to invest to. If they want to keep fiat, they can. If they want to keep crypto or tokenized asset or stable coins, they can, right? I hope we can see that in 3 to 5 years, right? But right now, happening already, I think end of this year, early next year, stablecoin payments is definitely going to happen. And I think that's going to help a lot of people, changing people's life, because, I mean, in every country, we already have very good local clearing network. I think Vietnam has 𝗕𝗃𝗃𝗵𝗏, right? Thailand has PromptPay. Like within the country, that's already perfect, right? It's free, it's real time. What else are you asking for, right? But right now, people talk about cross-border, people travel all the time. That problem hasn't been solved yet. And I think stablecoin payment will solve that problem.
Yeah, I think, I mean, my dream really is to see that, that integration across into Web3, right? And to be able to tap the liquidity in Web3, right? So today a lot, if you look at, tokenization and in particular 𝗓𝗏𝗃, right? It's all actually, in a very centralized environment, right? So what I'd really like to see happen is, whilst I think technologically it's possible, right? But a lot of hard work needs to be done. So that's really my dream, to be able to actually have sort of a borderless environment, right? When it comes to what is it that you can buy, what is it that you can sell, right? Similar to how, crypto is being dealt with today. And I think that's a possibility that can really come through.
Sorry, the time horizon was 5 years or 10 years? Okay. I imagine deeper and deeper integration with artificial intelligence, agentic AI moving to artificial general intelligence, where you have AI that orchestrates agents on behalf of an autonomous system that is run in the bank, right? I see that. And then the only way for that to happen is deep decentralized integration of networks and technology. And that involves tokenization, access to liquidity, stable coins, et cetera. So everything can be, clearing and settlement can happen instantaneously, 24/7, managed by systems that don't have to sleep, eat, or use the restroom. And that's what I imagine seeing. So whether it's a scary world or a opportunistic world, I think banks and supporting organizations need to understand that is a potential reality, right? And so, I mean, I'm not trying to paint a very dystopian future, but it's something to think about. And then what level of control should a bank have? What level of control should government maintain? What are the roles that we have using banking services as individuals and users? And then what do banks and management have to prepare for? So that's something to think about.
Okay, so I think that my very last question for any of you. So if you guys have any question or want to discuss the potential policy, please feel free to reach out to the The direction. Okay, okay. Thank you, Zach.
all for being here in our event today. We hope to see you again very soon.